If you're a CEO or a business unit leader or whatever, you would come to your finance team and say, hey, what's going on here? What's going on there? Why is the sales up? Why is the margin up? Why is it down? What's going on? And then they would go and pull data out of systems and put in a spreadsheet and look at the BI tool and look at the planning tool. And 3 days later, they'll answer the question. And then by that time, you forgot about it. This is probably the first time that AI can actually significantly solve some of the age-old problems in this space, in the FP&A space, but do it properly and do it confidently.
Welcome to the DevReady podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Today, a bit of a founder's journey, and really early as well. Serge has been around in his own businesses for quite a while, and starting out a new business in the financial planning and analytics sort of space, assisting CFOs, potentially CEOs, get better grip on their numbers and using AI to support that. Probably a few months in beta at the moment, so really in that early sort of stage of product ideation, but been around this industry for 10 plus years, I believe you said, Serge. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the DevReady podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Andrew, and look forward to having a chat.
Hey, welcome to come on, mate. It's always good to hear from people that are getting up and starting something new and having a crack, because it's where really the fun is. It's innovative, but it's also learning and engaging and moving pretty quickly at this sort of stage. Before we get into Uptio a little bit, so I'd love to share a bit about who you are to the audience, give people a bit of a context of how you got up to Uptio and what's your sort of background in the first place.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the tech space predominantly around sales, leadership, for probably about 15 odd years now. About 6 years ago, co-founded a management consulting business in the finance transformation and data consulting space. So I've been around the CFO, finance manager world for quite a while, and I work for a tech vendor as a senior leader before starting the consulting business for another 5 years. And essentially, part of what we did was really improve the way people ran the finance function in the business. And the CFO stack's fairly broad, but we predominantly focused on around reporting, planning, budgeting, forecasting, that type of stuff, and solving problems in that. And once you kind of get into it, there's a lot of processes, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of systems that you really have to kind of synthesize and align on and get visibility on. And in the traditional world, these are fairly complex type engagements that we would typically work on, 3 months to 2 years on average, depending on the size and the complexity of the business. And then recently, I've been thinking about this whole AI wave for a few years now, and how it might fit in this industry, and kind of tinkering in the background. And I've just recently sold out of this consulting business, and going all in on Uptio. And I feel like this is probably the first time that AI can actually, significantly solve some of the age-old problems in this space, in the FP&A space, but do it properly and do it confidently.
It's interesting times, isn't it? The power of the technology and how it seems to impact every single industry. I don't think anyone's getting left alone. It's just how deep you can go, and you need people with domain context to really go in and drive into a solution. In terms of working in the space and supporting CFOs over their journey, what's it taught you about the space? How has it evolved over that time? If not, is it really manually trying to crunch data, Excel spreadsheet type models? How is it? Yeah, what's it like?
I'll tell you a funny story. I think it was probably about 2017. I just remember I was giving a speech at this event, like one of those CFO symposium type events. You got 300 people there, and I attended about 100 of them. And
it's quite a few.
Yeah, no, we would go to quite a few and speak and present and run roundtables and all that jazz. But there was a slide. I had a slide, and and it was kind of like the future of finance, right, which has been talked about for 20 years. And the future of finance kind of said, automated workflow and autonomous finance and right? And I kind of asked the audience, when was the slide made? And people thought it was, 6 months old.
Just recently, yeah? Yeah, okay.
It was 10 years old.
Yeah, wow. It tells you a lot, doesn't it? Yeah,
so it's like the 10-year period, like nothing's changed, right? You hit the nail on the head, there's a lot of tools and a lot of good tools. And for example, like in my previous business, we did a lot of really good work implementing like planning tools, for example, and that can be extremely beneficial. Instead of a million spreadsheets going around every budget and planning process, that could really automate that. But in a nutshell, the space hasn't really changed for about 20 years materially, right? Everyone still uses a spreadsheet. Everyone still goes about different ways.
Spreadsheet macro type models, yeah, that's probably what they're mostly doing, right? And the extrapolation of data is difficult then. So getting it to a point where you can actually work with it, I imagine that's complex in its own right.
The data side of things is always, it's always a question mark on how to do that. And there's ways for sure. There's a lot of tech that are just, integration tools that can extract the data and put it in a data warehouse or something like that. But what I feel like at the moment, and what we're kind of testing with Uptio and getting some really good results, is probably for the first time we're seeing the power of changing the workflow or the workflows that typically people use on a day-to-day in FP&A and in the CFO space to answer questions, right? Because frankly, it all boils down to, if you think about it, if you're a CEO or a business unit leader or whatever, you'd come to your finance team and say, hey, what's going on here? What's going on there? Why is the sales up? Why is the margin up? Why is it down? What's going on? And then they would go and pull data out of systems and put in a spreadsheet and look at the BI tool and look at the planning tool. And 3 days later, they'll answer the question. And then by that time, you forgot about it.
Yeah, or you've moved on, or things have changed already. Yes, get it.
Yeah, so we're trying to change that workflow. And I feel like with AI and a few other bits, it's probably the first time it's got a meaningful chance of solving that problem, and we're testing that and building on that and seeing some really good results.
Well, in terms of, I think you're right around that manual workflow. How do we intervene and then assist and maybe build a chat interface to AI to support what you're doing there? I imagine that's how you're sort of going towards this. What's the approach you're up to? What are you imagining could be in the hands of CFOs, CEOs moving forward if you get this right? So
we're working with, and I think one thing I've learned about building a product, because I've been around a lot of software and implementations, but I haven't really built something from the ground up. And you can get caught in thinking you know everything, but that's not the case at all. So we kind of really want to solve problems that people care about. And so we're working with kind of mid-market finance teams and a few different verticals on that, testing on their data and so forth. But ultimately, we want to keep it super simple, at least in the beginning, right? Natural language question, what's going on with my margin? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Uptio analyzes it and gives you the answer straight away, right? Instead of waiting 3 days or figuring it out, you can get an answer straight away. And it's a contextualized, the big points of difference that you really kind of have to think about, it has to be accurate and it has to be traceable, right? So as you know, you can just put stuff in a chatbot and it'll tell you lots of good stuff, but if it's not sure if it's going to be accurate or not, so it has to be extremely deterministic, and so we call it a high precision FP&A. So the answers have to be accurate. That's kind of like a non-negotiable, and you have to see the workings, essentially the traceability in the data and how it was calculated. But ultimately, we want to turn that into a full-blown FP&A agent that continuously scans and monitors your data and gives you proactive insights and a whole bunch of other things that you can ultimately get a lot more understanding of how the business is performing, but also, what happened, why it happened, because the why is always a tricky bit, and what to do next, right?
Yeah, unpacking the why, that's tough sometimes,
And give you that context, internal data, external data, signals, there's so many things, but again, it's kind of slow but steady.
What's been the approach? You mentioned working directly with clients to help support the build and evolve it. I speak to a lot of startups and founders that like to keep things under the hood until they release, and it's a scary proposition. What point did you make the decision? I'm going to work with a bunch of clients and support them, and just effectively come up with a solution collectively and co-create. That's what we were basically doing.
Yeah, so Uptio's got a bit more history before. Like, we kind of tinkered around while I had my consulting business in the background and kind of failed in a sense. But I had some technical people, and the one thing I learned was you can't build software in a dark room thinking you know everything, right? So we did that for a little bit, and then I decided to scrap the whole thing and start again. And I had a good...
It's a learning journey sometimes, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the joys of founding things.
Yeah.
And I had a good product manager that I hired, and he still works with me. And I just I thought, no, this isn't working. Like, this isn't the way to do it. And I basically read a lot of books and realized that my hunch was right. You kind of got to co-create. So essentially, because I know a lot of companies in the space and my network and all of that stuff. And I essentially had a chat with them, and I said, mate, how do you feel about something like this? And they said, mate, that's great. What do we need to do? And I said, okay, well, we need to go through this process. I want to really dive into what the problems are, even though I kind of know them, but let's dive into them, but from a product lens, not from like a consulting lens, but from a product lens, which is very different. Kind of like the MOM test. I don't know if you've heard about that book, but it's a good book about building products. And so we did that. We did a lot of discovery around that, and then we synthesized it into like, what are the trends, what are the themes that people constantly are saying to us that are going to make a difference. And this is how we landed on the insights on actuals, right? And I'll give you an example that on a big assumption we got wrong the first time, which was, in FP&A, it's forecasting is a big challenge, right? Forecasting sales, revenue, everything.
Anything is a big challenge to any forecasting, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And look, we thought we'll focus on that through AI, machine learning, and so forth. But it wasn't very replicable from one company to the next. But then also, so we spoke to 30 different businesses, and maybe 2 were like, oh yes, forecasting is my main thing. The rest were like, actually, I just want to know what's going on with my actual data. It's taking me way too long to analyze. I find things out 6 months later after the fact.
Yeah, you can't make decisions. You need to have good data. You make better decisions. Impacts the future anyway. At the point in time, if you never figure out what the real reason is, then your future state's never going to be the best it could be. So it's interesting the way we put out energy. So you'd call the first thing a failure. It's a learning experience. And sometimes, we analyse things and we think, yep, this is definitely what we're going after, but you're banging in the wrong direction, really, which is not uncommon. But if you're not in it, having conversations, you're never going to work that out either.
Well, exactly right. It's, and you're right, things fail, but fail is all about learning, right? Because, and there's just no other way to learn. You're not going to get it right the first time. But the big takeaway for me was just to really figure out how to make something that people actually care about. And have people go on the journey with you. So ultimately, we take the requirements, we build. And the crazy thing now with AI is just you can move so fast, right?
It's a hell of a lot quicker than it was 6 months ago. Like
It's just wild.
You can ideate a lot quicker, test, validate a lot quicker. It's phenomenal the speed that we're getting, and you can skip layers. Yeah, you can definitely skip layers of going through. The old way of developing was ideate, draw some wireframes up, get a UX guy involved, get some feedback, then go into a build mode. Now you can just build some wireframes or some clickable prototypes or UI bits to begin and validate that, then just build off the back of it. So there's lots of speed and efficiency in that for sure.
The speed also comes with a bit of a catch, though. You can go so fast, but you can get it so wrong so fast too.
It's like anything.
You really got to know what you're doing otherwise you're just going to go a lot faster, but keep going in circles as well.
Well, in the end, right, you're giving people, well, the way I frame it is you're giving people a faster hammer. Are they banging on the right nail? Are you actually planning, thinking, strategizing? If you're planning, thinking, strategizing, you could have built the product for forecasting faster, spent 6 months, 12 months, and you've got to validate this stuff, right? You still got to QA it, test it, and then put it to market, and it's wrong. But if you're not really engaging with the market, getting feedback quickly, then you're building the wrong thing anyway. So you're just burning time, capital, energy, and someone else is maybe working on what could be your solution. So yeah, it's still about planning, strategizing, positioning, understanding user needs, and just getting that quick feedback loop on it. Because yeah, you can go down a garden path very quickly with AI, and you see it all the time. People just continuously look to bloat, but a bloated product's not a good product either.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's when you're building something, I'm sure you know, right? You get so many crazy ideas, right? And you speak to people and you're like, oh, we could do this, we could do that. But are they actually going to use it? Are they going to pay for it? Or does it just sound like wishful thinking? So you got to go through those processes to really determine what's worth building and when. So we're basically in the midst of that at the moment. We'll probably give it in the first year. We've been having user feedback for the past few months, but we'll get it into the first user's hands probably in the next month or so.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, because we just really want to make sure, again, around the accuracy and the traceability. There's quite a lot of tech involved there to get that right.
Building with AI, 90% of it is QA testing, validation. Yeah, I think people don't understand that. Yes, we can build quickly, but if we're going to utilize AI to make decisions, validating and proving it's actually correct is the hardest part of the project. It's not the UI flow and the chatbot interface or whatever it is. It's not even the data integration points, I'd say. It's really how are we validating this advice or decision is correct. And that's the difficulty with AI. That's where really we find working with it, the more you push it, it's all the QA, quality control, is where the energy goes.
Well, it wants to make you feel good, like I say, right? You can load a spreadsheet into Claude and it will give you all the answers you want, but it might make up some of it, right? So
yeah, and it may not have all the data points to really give you that right advice either, because it's not just about a spreadsheet when you're talking about the why in the financial impact, right? There can be other means to the why.
And I think as well, another talking point that kind of came up that I found interesting is with LLMs and so forth, they're probabilistic, right? They kind of guess the word that's coming next, right? So you could be talking to them for days and using up the tokens by going around the circles because he wants to talk to you. But one thing that we've, a really good piece of user feedback was like, if you don't have the answer, if you don't know what this data piece means or this chunk of data, you got to actually say that so they can go and investigate further rather than just saying, oh, rather than assuming what I think it might be. So
of course.
Things like that's quite important.
And that goes down to how do you then validate what it's produced and how do you weight if it's correct or not. And that's where the complexity lies, right? I'd love to talk about the what and the when a little bit with you because you're in an earlier stage, right? What do we focus on in this moment? and when is more about what's the product roadmap and how do you massage and manage that. So for you, how do you unpack that as you're going through the journey of really in an ideation, rapid, probably agile framework in the way you're operating with feedback across the journey? The what first. So unpacking the what, how are you doing that as you're moving right now?
For me, there's some fundamental building blocks that are non-negotiable, and those need to be right before anything else can even be thought about, right? Because if you don't have those core foundational elements, you can't really scale up. You're going to build on shaky foundations. So we've gone through the discovery, the design process, ourselves internal and with customers to really get a good feel on like what are those key foundational things, and we boiled them down to about 5 or 6 key concepts of the platform, and what they need to be, and then we just go down into more detail and design exactly A, what it needs to do, but B, for me, the most important thing is the output, right? So I'm not technical myself, but
that's okay. But you're the one probably driving lots of conversations.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I know what it needs to do. So it's about when I talk to it, this is how it needs to behave, right? And we need to get those foundational things right, and that's kind of the next piece in the roadmap. And then like the roadmap's massive. There's a lot of things there, but
they can grow very quickly, can't they? Just backlog work for years, but yeah, that will change anyway. You'll find them as you get into customers' hands. Roadmap starts to shift and pivot anyway, and that's where it's. But you're right. You need a foundation to begin with, a core product, core deliverables. Getting to those is like you said, through conversations, feedback, and then working on that. Getting into the hands of users, then your roadmap starts to evolve a lot quicker.
You have a hunch where things might go.
Hunches, yeah.
But
that's true.
I think the user validation and feedback is absolutely crucial, and everything we want to do is we want it in consultation with users. So yeah, and keeping it simple, right? I think you can try to boil the ocean when you're first building something and have 100 features, or you could just do one thing really, really well. And I think that's the preferred path at the moment. Let's just do 1 or 2 things really, really well, and then build on top of that.
I find it fascinating in your space with the vision of assisting a CFO make decisions or understand his data. The one thing really well is difficult. It's a big juggernaut of data points and conversations. How do you boil it down to one thing really well? Because, that I find it interesting to unpack, because to really get to the point of the right outcome, there's a lot going on to get there, or the right message or the right feedback around data and points. And how have you sort of put in that in your own mind to get to a point of 1 or 2 things you're going to do really well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that's one of the key problems in this space, right? Is you've got so many different source systems stapled together through either some really good tech, like a modern ecosystem that connects it together, ETL, planning, BI, ERP, all of those bits and pieces working in sync. And that's kind of the limit, but you're still kind of doing a lot of things manually. But the crazy again thing now is the data volume question itself. It's not really a problem. And in 2026, a lot of companies have got some type of decent grasp on their data already. And then the other thing is, with AI and what I call traditional software, I try to look at it a little bit differently, right? So traditionally you're implementing everything, right? It goes through an implementation process, right? Let's say you put an ERP. You would design it, implement it, hopefully get it right. A planning tool, design it, implement it, and so forth, right? Get the data.
The hopefully get it right is the
hopefully get it right, we're trying to have zero implementation, and why not guide the user, and we can build these flows with the user, but there's different ways to skin the cat around the data. So, you can use third-party integration tools, and they've done the work, right? Just get them, put in your credentials, plug it in, off we go, right? Problem ticked. We've got the data. Now we can analyze it, contextualize it, and off you go. So,
if anyone doesn't know much about that, there are services you can subscribe to, which you can use into your SAF product, which I think you're alluding to, and then have integration layers already opened up, which is an important thing for especially early stage to understand, because that opens up what you're doing right now. I can integrate with a SAP, with a Xero, with a Mile, with the this off the bat pretty quickly. Maybe it's a Google Sheets. All these things can come out of the box. So yeah, it is huge.
Building integrations is definitely something that we'll do. It's just crucial.
Yes.
That's just the path that we'll go down. But we kind of want to integrate, connect, credentials, bang, data. So think of it, data to insight in like minutes, right? That's the premise, right? And then there's complexity around combining multiple data sets and machine learning. But there's a lot of really amazing tech out there. You just have to figure out how to use it the best way. And I think a lot of people, a lot of companies, they get stuck thinking that, I'll just use a Microsoft or an SAP or this, and then I'll do it everything, or I'll have a few point solutions, which is cool. But there's a whole bunch of amazing tech out there that's just off the shelf. And for us, it's like, how do we, for example, like machine learning models, right? There's only been 10,000, 50,000 data scientists putting them together. They're open source. Like, how do we apply them, right? So
there's lots of options. So open source tech is a major area, and if you're not using it in a certain way, or you're pretty crazy, because you're right. It's a jigsaw puzzle. So when you're building technology, think of it as a big jigsaw puzzle, and how do I get enough pieces around that I can actually, without building anything, how can I bring some pieces together and connect them and begin the process a lot quicker? That sounds like what you're up to.
Get the right output, ultimately, right? That works, it's secure.
That security is critical, yeah. And you've got on a website, they're always ISO standard, SOC 2 moving towards, you need to have these things, especially the market you're targeting, which is a bit more mid-tier from what I understand, right? It's just they're not going to talk to you unless you do this. It's really, like you said, non-negotiable. So you have to be going down that path. So there's more to than just building a product. It's setting up the business to be able to support the clients that you're targeting, to be able to say, yep, you tick all the boxes, we'll give you a go in the first place. Because even betaing can be hard without having those boxes ticked, because they want to open up their data points.
Well, we wouldn't be able to have any customer data unless we tick that box to begin with, right? There's a few, and luckily I've been through this process so many times.
Understand it, yeah.
I know what to expect, but you kind of have to get the foundations right for anyone to really talk to you. Otherwise, it can't be like one of those vibe coded apps. It's like, put the data in there and hope for the best.
Oh, no, there are people can vibe code a few things, hope for the best, and never going to see the light of day, because you're not going to be able to get through to the clientele or the customers. They're not going to tick you off.
That's right.
Serge, with Uptio, what's the vision? What do you? I can clearly get a picture of you're building an insights engine for CFOs, CEOs to just understand where they're at today. Where do you imagine this being in 12 months? What's the vision?
Look, the long-term vision is having this FP&A agent. We sometimes call it like a second brain for finance. Essentially, in thousands upon thousands of mid-market and even SMBs, businesses across the world, right? That's the vision. Every business on the planet needs to analyze their financial data, operational data, and there's a lot of challenges that go along with that. There's so many bits and pieces, and if we can do a couple of things right, then the market signals we're getting so far are, extremely positive. But it's a tall mountain to climb, just because of the complexity and some of the things I mentioned around what the tech needs to do. Mm-hmm. But look, every founder's like, oh, it's going to be $1 billion business in 6 months, right? But look, I just want to build a really solid product and then a really solid business for the next few years. But it can really be anywhere.
It goes back to that, what you said a little bit earlier about that solve one problem. I think sometimes in a product that you're building, the product needs to work, and that can take time. So it's not going to be a quick development product. It's going to take, even with the technology we have to support us in development, it's still going to take time to get this right and validate with clients before we can really hit the market and live to the promise. I think when you jump into a product, you understand the type of product you have. It's a bit more of a longer term trajectory, which might be a 12-month period, or then some might have a quick MVP in 1 month, 2 months, and they can run. I think that's one of the challenges you've got, because validating, getting the test cases, making sure you're delivering, then you can open up and go to market. So you're really probably in that boat of thinking, I would imagine.
Yeah, you're 100% right. You can't really go to market with something that's half baked or not working. It's it needs to be really strong. It needs to be bulletproof. And that's kind of the fun bit, the interesting bit, the super scary bit, all of the above, right?
There's a lot of risk in this area for sure, but with risk comes reward, right? If you're willing to dig in and push, and I'd imagine the more clientele in the early stages that you get, the better off your models are going to be and outcomes are going to be over time. So having those beta clients is going to be really important to you, and how many you can bring on to the vision. And it's all about selling a vision at the beginning. It's this is the vision we're going after. This is what we're up to, and then just keeping the funding and the model going along. Because you mentioned offline you're bootstrapping it at this stage, which is, no mean feat, right? So it's going to take a bit of effort there.
I'm a little bit lucky, maybe. I've just sold one business and then going hard on this one. So we'll see how we go. And I like a bit of risk.
If you've been in business, I get it. Anyone in business has.
It's not for everyone.
He's a risk taker to some extent. There's different levels, but everyone that's in business has some risk appetite for sure.
See how we go. Yeah, as you know, right?
Yeah.
You got to kind of give it a go. And look, if it doesn't work, you learn and you do something else. But if it does work, then
opens up bigger opportunities for sure.
Yeah, exactly right, and be really rewarding. So we'll see how we go.
Serge, I'd love to catch up in 12 months and see how it's all progressing and get you back on the podcast to talk about the journey from the betaing to understanding the product, evolving it, and now we're live with X amount of customers. I'd love to have that conversation when you're ready, get you to come on. If anyone wants to learn about what we're up to and maybe participate in the early stage beta, it's probably jump on uptio.com. That's uptio.com. Go check out Serge and what the team's up to, and I'm sure you'll be happy with some early betas, but maybe not yet, but at some point I'm sure you would be, to support the journey for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. Look forward to chatting in 12 months.
Yeah, let's lock it in the calendar. Thank you, Serge. Thanks for coming on DevReady podcast, and good luck, because it's exciting what you're up to, because you're solving real problems with new innovative technology. And as you said, the industry hasn't changed for 20 years. How you carve out an impact is something like this that actually works. So good luck with it all.
I appreciate it, Andrew. Likewise. Talk to you soon. See ya.
Thanks, mate.